Don't tell anybody I'm wearing a wire. I'm all set. Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you. Let's give Third Act a round of applause for the incredible work that they've done to organize today. So happy to be here. And from that show of hands, it looks like maybe folks are really interested in kind of the Solar 101 about the technology, about the costs and the incentives. So I'm going to start there, and then I'll talk very quickly. I'll touch on policy, but also I'll be on Len Luca's solar panel, where I think it's going to be more policy-oriented. And I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to stand up because it's just a little more comfortable here. I already told you about Nicaea. And I think this is maybe just an important point to lead with. Solar power is the most affordable source of electricity in the world. And that's something that we couldn't say that 10 years ago. Frankly, we probably couldn't say that 5 years ago. So I think we're living in a time where there's a lot of pessimism and there's a lot to be really concerned about politically, environmentally. But I think that the whole idea of Sunday, as I understand it, is to celebrate this very fact that solar, we have innovated and driven down costs and scaled up manufacturing and deployment to the point where it genuinely is the cheapest way to power our lives. So I think that that's something that we should all hold on to with a little bit of hope. And as costs have come down, deployment has really gone up. A lot more folks have adopted solar, whether it's putting solar on their home or their business, signing up for a local community solar project, or utility scale solar, which is getting built all over the world. Equipment costs have come way down. There is still work to do on soft costs, which has a lot to do with cutting through permitting red tape and making it easier to plug projects into the grid. Looking at New York, again, a really positive story here. And this is just looking at rooftop and community solar, which is the vast majority of what we've built in New York. We are working on some utility scale projects here in New York State, but 93% of what's up and running is rooftop and community solar. Last year, we built more than 1.2 gigawatts of rooftop and community solar. We have about 7 gigawatts up and running, which is enough to power more than 1 million homes. And we have more than 250,000 systems up and running in the state. So we've made tremendous progress. We have a lot of momentum. And the trick right now is to keep that momentum going and to address the barriers that are arising on permitting and interconnection so we can keep going with that meteoric growth. We do have both federal and state policy headwinds. So we're very clear-eyed about that. I think folks probably are well aware of some of the federal policy headwinds where the Trump administration and Congress this summer passed H.R. 1. They've referred to it as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, right? And what that did, among other things, is it eliminates tax credits for solar on homes by the end of this calendar year, and then it phases out commercial tax credits shortly after that, while maintaining subsidies for fossil fuels, right? So that, of course, is a real challenge, and it's been disruptive to the industry. Unfortunately, we've had what some have described as friendly fire here at home, where unexpectedly in April, the New York Public Service Commission cut $271 million of previously approved funding from the state solar program. So what this means is that we not only have federal incentives going away, we have state incentives going away at the same time. So there is a lot of work to do. I think frankly, there could be a universe where we could build solar on every rooftop and have community solar all over the state without these incentives. If we really just cut through a lot of the permitting and interconnection red tape, that is what we want to get to. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get there, and so the incentives are really important. I'd say if you are thinking about installing solar on your home or your business, now is really the time to do it to get the most out of those incentives. The stakes are high. This is about affordability. Electric bills are too high. They keep going up. And installing solar is a great way to take control of your electric bills and to make your life more affordable and lock in 25 years of low-cost electricity that's not going to increase every 2-3 years as the utility rates do. Of course, the reduced pollution is hugely important. And then last but not least, jobs and economic development. The solar industry in New York State supports about 15,000, 16,000 jobs. That number is only going to grow. These solar energy systems deliver tax revenue to local governments. There's a whole host of benefits from building out clean energy here in the state. So with that introduction behind, I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts of the technology. So one of the most amazing things about solar is how simple it is. It has 3 major pieces of technology for a solar energy system, and this is true if you're putting solar on your home or your business, or if you were building a massive solar farm in the desert, you still have basically 3 building blocks. You have your solar photovoltaic module, or your solar panel, which is a device that essentially, when sunlight hits it, it generates electricity. So a modern miracle. The technology that we use today is similar to what was used 40, 50 years ago in the NASA space program. The only difference is that the costs have come down to Earth. Right? So that's a big difference where we're seeing widespread adoption. The next item, the one in the middle here, is called the inverter. And you could think of that as the brain of a solar energy system. So what the inverter does is it takes the solar electricity that's being generated by your solar panels, and then it makes it match the electricity that's coming from the utility. What we generate from a solar panel is direct current electricity. That's the kind of electricity that's stored in your batteries. People get intimidated when I talk about DC and AC, but I remind everybody, all of you have a DC device, battery device, that you probably carry around in your pocket all day. And AC is the power that comes out the outlet. So the inverter takes the power from DC and converts it to AC, so it plays nicely with the grid. And then the last piece is the racking system. So if you're putting solar on the roof, this is important because that racking system, you want to make sure it's installed properly, that it's properly, it's watertight, and it's done to spec, so it's going to hold up for the 25-year life of the solar panels without issue. You could have the racking system looks different if you're doing a ground mount solar farm, but fundamentally it's the same idea. It's just something to put the panels on. Solar panels operate for 25 plus years. A typical solar panel will have a 25-year manufacturer warranty. If they'll give you a 25-year warranty, it's because they're confident it's not going to fail in that period. Really minimal in terms of maintenance. I generally tell folks who install solar, it's good to take a look at the online monitoring. They all have online monitoring, so you can look at it on your computer. There's some people who get really nerdy about it, and they check it every morning, and they like to send their friends, look how much electricity I generated from the sun yesterday. But generally speaking, most people, it's kind of set it and forget it. It requires direct sunlight, so if you have beautiful tree canopy over your home, you might not be a good candidate for putting solar on your rooftop. Another thing to keep in mind is that solar is grid connected. So most people who install solar today are still connected to the utility. They just pay the utility a lot less because they're generating their own solar power. What that means is that at night and on a cloudy day, you have seamless power for your home. There's no interruption to power in your home. Increasingly, folks are installing battery backup as well, which would, if you do that, it means that if the grid goes down for a blackout or whatever the case may be, you're going to have that resilient backup power. And those batteries can actually help you lower your bill further with new programs that the utilities are rolling out in New York State, where you can basically enroll your battery in a program, and then the utility will draw on your battery during those times of peak demand, again, further reducing fossil fuel consumption, because if they can discharge your battery to meet peak demand, they don't need to fire up an oil or a gas plant to meet that peak. I'm going to skip over some of this. Maybe the slide here, the takeaway would be that solar panels are like light bulbs. They're measured in watts. And 1,000 watts is a kilowatt, and 1,000,000 watts is a megawatt. If you're talking to a solar salesperson and they start talking kilowatts and megawatts, just stop them and say, talk to me in plain English, explain what this really means, and just don't be intimidated by it. What? Exactly. Over time, the systems generate energy, right? So the instantaneous power output is measured in watts, but over time, you generate kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours, or kWh, is generally what you're paying for on your electric bill. So every kilowatt hour you generate on your rooftop is a kilowatt hour you don't need to buy from your utility company. Solar, as you would expect, predictably generates more in the middle of the day. It's not lunar energy, and it generates more in the summer than in the winter. Again, that's not a weakness of the technology. That is just a core attribute of it. It's something that's very easy to plan around from kind of a utility perspective. But you can expect most of your utility bill savings to happen in those spring and summer months. And you might generate and bank credits that carry forward into the fall and the winter. So how solar works, so there's really two different ways that you can participate in solar here in New York State. Either you can put solar on your home or your business, so I call that on-site solar, or there's off-site solar, which is most commonly referred to as community solar. First, with on-site solar, the way this works is sunlight hits your solar panels on the rooftop, it generates electricity that goes to your inverter, And then that's going to power all of the things in your home, your refrigerator, your air conditioner, your TV, God knows what else, right? But it's going to power your life. And to the extent you're generating any more solar power than you are using at any given time, that excess power is going to flow out to the utility grid, and it's going to power your neighbors. You have a meter that's measuring that power flow, what's coming in from the utility and what are you sending out to the utility. And then you settle up with them with your monthly electric bill. This is called net energy metering, where the meter flows both ways. It's a really important foundational policy that makes it affordable for folks to install solar on their homes. Offsite or community solar. So about 10 years ago, New York launched a community solar program. We now have the biggest community solar program in the whole country. Community solar allows folks to share in the output of a local solar project without doing anything to your home. So instead of putting solar panels on your rooftop, you just subscribe to a local solar project. A developer goes and finds partners with a farmer or a rural landowner or a commercial industrial business owner that's got a big rooftop. They'll build a solar project, and then they share the output of that solar energy system with sometimes hundreds or maybe even 1,000 families who all get a part of it. The great thing about community solar, it's typically offering guaranteed utility bill savings with no upfront cost, no cancellation fee. So it's really a consumer-friendly product. And again, you get to support a local solar project. So a great tool for renters, a great tool for folks who maybe have a lot of shade or a slate roof or something where you can't put solar on your own rooftop. Then I've got some photos just to show that residential solar doesn't look the same everywhere. On the left, that is maybe a more typical capital region home. On the right, that is Brooklyn. And so you can see there's like an elevated canopy system above a flat rooftop. So I think most of you from the capital region will probably have something that looks more like the one on your left. This is a commercial solar installation, a carport solar installation, again, a great dual use of land. And then last but not least, ground-mounted solar. Yeah, I see a question, and I think we should just get right into it with questions. I'm going to bring you a microphone.
Yeah, I just heard about what they call plug-in. How is plug-in different from what you're talking about?
That's a great question. So plug-in solar, also referred to as balcony solar, is something that's been widely adopted in Europe. And there's growing excitement about plug-in solar in the United States. Utah passed enabling legislation to allow for plug-in solar. Plug-in solar is like instead of hiring a contractor and doing a big home improvement project where you're putting solar panels on your roof and it's enough to offset your whole electric bill, instead it's more like a kit that you'd buy on Amazon or at Home Depot that has maybe 2 or 3 solar panels, and you just plug it into an outlet. So you find, either you put it on your balcony or in your backyard or somewhere where you can kind of point it towards the sun and you plug it in. It's not going to offset your whole home electric bill. It's maybe more like 5 or 10% offset. It's a really neat idea. I think for that to be popularized in the United States, there are a lot of things that would need to happen, including developing the National Electrical Code to make sure it's done safely, UL standards for fire safety, all that good stuff. But I think there's a lot of excitement, and if they've done it in Europe, there's no reason we couldn't do that here as well.
So does that require a change in the meter? You have to put in a new meter for that?
I don't believe so. No, I think that in Utah, the enabling legislation allows you to use, you don't need any kind of change in the meter or change with the utility. And I saw that there was a woman right behind you who had her hand raised first. Oh, he got it. Oh, okay, wonderful. Should we do one more question and then I'll go into incentives? Oh, okay.
Hello. Sorry, back here. About over 15 years ago, we put in rooftop solar, and at the time, National Grid had several strictures, and I wonder if they're still in effect. The one was we could not install anything that would exceed our annual usage. Fortunately, we still get a surplus. But also, there was a long wait for the meter, for the new meter, for the net meter. Is that still in effect?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there still is a limit. I believe it's 110% of your annual usage. So you can't oversize your rooftop solar installation for a home. And in terms of the timing to get meters installed, I think it's gotten better. There's certainly a lot of work to do to streamline permitting and interconnection, but I do think it's gotten better in the last 4 or 5 years at least. Should we keep doing questions, or do you guys want to see my slide about incentives?
I have a quick question. So our solar panels are about 10 years old, and the roof space available gave us about 70% of what we needed. But since then, we got electric cars, and next week we're getting some heat pumps. I would love to make up the difference at community solar, but you're not allowed to net meter in 2 places. We could get more panels, but we don't really have an ideal spot for them. So I just wonder, how come I can't net meter in 2 places? It's silly. Is there anything to be done about that?
It's a good question. I think, right, I think in defense of the utilities, billing and crediting for a lot of these programs is complicated. And I think that that's the reason why they wouldn't allow it. It's like to keep track of your net meter, and then to also figure out how to apply credits from an offsite solar project. I think it's a lot for them to keep track of. We've had issues with billing and crediting in the state, so that might be a big part of it. I know you have a question. Well, I'm sticking around. So I want to actually quickly talk about tax incentives, because I think this is probably one of the most important things for those of you who are thinking about solar for your home that have not already made that decision. So if you install solar and energy storage, or just solar on your home here in New York State, you'd be eligible for 2 major incentives. There's a residential tax credit that covers up to 25% of the cost of an installation that you could claim on your state income taxes the year after you install. It's capped at $5,000 per household, but that will typically cover, at least a quarter of the cost of a system. And then there is a federal income tax credit that's worth 30% of the cost of the system. That federal income tax credit, the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed a couple years ago, extended that tax credit, which has been on the books since the 90s. It extended it for a decade. HR 1 that the Trump administration signed into law this summer cuts that at the end of this calendar year. So if you want to install solar and you want Uncle Sam to cover 30% of the cost, I would encourage you to move quickly. You need to get the system installed this calendar year, which frankly at this point it's going to be a rush. You've got 3 months and change to get the system installed. And I've got some general recommendations I give to folks who are moving forward with solar projects. And I think the same logic still applies. It's like there's urgency, so you want to move quickly, but you still don't want to rush, in the sense like you still want to make sure you find the right contractor, you take your time, you understand the terms and conditions. You don't want someone to use the fact that there's an incentive going away to bully you into a deal that's not the ideal deal. Again, most of the folks who are selling solar here in New York State are wonderful, but I always tell folks, get multiple bids, make sure you understand the terms and the financing and everything, and make sure you feel comfortable. Move quickly to lock in incentives, but don't rush. Resources for homeowners, I'm going to figure out with our amazing organizers how we can circulate this to attendees. But there are a bunch of great resources that you can look at to help with things like finding good contractors, evaluating financing options, and that applies to both solar and energy storage here in the state. Tips for going solar, I think I hit on some of these, but get multiple quotes. Think about local contractors as well as some of the national providers. I think it's sometimes good to get quotes from both, just so you have that point of comparison. Check references and online reviews. You might really like the salesperson you're working with, but again, it's always good to trust and verify. Read the fine print of your contract. If you don't understand something, don't feel stupid. Be smart and ask, what does this mean? And then move quickly to lock in incentives, but again, don't rush. And then community solar. Even if you can't put solar panels on your own rooftop, you can subscribe to a local community solar project. Community solar typically offers a 5 to 10% discount on the value of those credits. So it provides guaranteed bill savings. You're supporting a local solar project, a great thing to do, again, if you've got a beautiful tree canopy covering your home. If you want to learn more about community solar, again, the state of New York, the energy agency NYSERDA has a nice website for that. And I have more slides, but I don't think I have a lot of time. So maybe it makes sense to do a few more questions. Okay, and
These are 3 small questions.
3, okay.
No, but they're small. The first is, if you have 25-year guarantee, as you say, that it'll be no longer serviceable. The second question is, I have my grassland bird thing that keeps saying to reject some of the solar things that are, that will stop some of the grassland birds because they're on property. So that's the second that I get as a negative thing.
Yeah.
And I will stop with those two questions.
Those are two-
because the first one was that people said, well, what do you do when they're no longer operable? Are they just wasted? Or what happens with that? And the second one, what about grassland birds?
Thank you. Those are such good questions. I think this actually gets at sort of the heart of some of the tension between clean energy deployment and traditional ecological conservation. So solar panels can be recycled. NYSEA has a new member that just set up. It's one of the first recycling facilities in the Northeast in New Jersey. And we're seeing more and more solar panels being diverted from landfill at the end of their useful life, 25, 30 years out, where they are, essentially being taken apart. The aluminum is reusable, the glass is reusable, and they can extract a lot of those metals and use them again. So that I think is something that's important from a long-term perspective. Something I just want to remind everybody is that if you install solar panels, the amount of waste that you would generate from that solar panel 30 years from now, even if it did all end up in a landfill, which it won't, it pales in comparison to the amount of waste and pollution that's created by burning fossil fuels and the whole supply chain to extract those fossil fuels, to transport those fossil fuels, and everything else. So I think that's a good question, but we have a good answer. And in terms of grassland birds, I think there's maybe some similar considerations, like the trade-off, like if you were to build a larger scale solar project, a ground mount solar project, what would that mean for certain local ecosystems and local ecology? Those are really important considerations. I think that solar deployment can be done in a really smart and responsible way. And at the same time, I think we also need to not lose sight of the fact that the thing that is going to make our planet uninhabitable for those grassland birds is climate change. And if we do not deploy clean power and do it quickly and at scale, we're spitting into the wind, so to speak, right? So I think that, again, and New York goes above and beyond in comparison to many other states in terms of the ways that they're prioritizing ecological conservation with clean energy deployment. And actually, some of my members hate it. They say, gosh, I can go and I can build a solar project in Texas at half the price and twice as fast. And the reason is because in New York, I have to work through the Department of Environmental Conservation. They've got this new freshwater wetlands protections, all these things that make it harder and harder and more expensive to build. I think it's a tricky balance, and I'll say I think that we're still figuring out what that right balance is. You have a question and a microphone, so.
Okay, I have the microphone. Is it working? Yes. First of all, there was a study recently published that showed that farmers who had panel farms on their farms and planted pollinator gardens underneath them had better yields than the crops next to them. My question is, what about permitting and interconnection? How do I go to my town, which is supposedly a smart climate town, and find out what is involved in the permitting and interconnection to reduce it?
I love that question. I'm going to jump ahead to a slide I've got at the end here. So red tape is really, we think, the key barrier to solar and storage here in New York State and doing this cost effectively. The challenges that we face are rising interconnection costs for community solar projects, as you've mentioned, restrictive local laws and moratoria on the zoning side, and then really complicated permitting. So these are not insurmountable challenges. They don't cost anything to address. It just takes political will. So if New York wants to tackle these things, the good news is that we have bills introduced that would tackle all of these issues. The first is the Accelerate Solar for Affordable Power Act, which would raise our distributed solar goal and drive down costs with interconnection reforms. We've got the Community Solar Act, which would create statewide guidelines for permitting community solar projects. So making sure that towns that there's kind of a standard baseline for how towns are approaching community solar. And then automated permitting for residential solar and storage, something that many other states have adopted and that could be adopted by your local town as well. And if folks want to get involved and you want to see more affordable solar power in New York State, you can sign this QR code and you can fill out the petition to put your name on the list. If nothing else, what that does is it gives us a way to follow up with you and to share more information, including this slide deck. And I realize I'm running up against time, so I'm looking to see, I see more hands, and I see, again, someone with a microphone. So let's take your question.
All right. I have a question and a comment. So the question is, what's the landscape for solar companies who are wanting to install for community solar in terms of tax incentives? What do they have to avail themselves of by what time?
Great question. So what came out this summer from Washington, D.C., first, H.R. 1 essentially eliminated the tax credit for community solar projects, but the way they did is that you need to start construction on your project by July 4th of next year. So right now there's a rush to start projects, and if you start by July 4th, then you have 4 years to complete your project. So in New York, there's a pipeline of maybe 3 to 4 gigawatts of community solar that's been under development for some time. And right now we are working like heck with, I should say, good support and partnership with the state agencies to figure out what we can do to get as many of those projects across the finish line. So that's happening right now. There's also a 2027 deadline where anything that you get up and running by the end of 2027 is eligible for the commercial tax credit. And there's some confusion here because the tax credit for homeowners goes away at the end of this year. But then the tax credit for commercial projects phases out a little bit slower. It still is really fast. And frankly, it's going to be really detrimental to the local solar workforce and the industry. And I think that's what creates such a heightened sense of urgency around permitting and interconnection reform. If we're phasing out all of these incentives, there's kind of, I think you could say that New York was like a expensive place to do business. I think we can all agree New York is an expensive place to do anything. But the state stood behind clean energy and was putting money into it. It's clear with the major new focus on affordability and the actions we're seeing coming out of the Public Service Commission that there's no longer a lot of appetite for spending that kind of money. So we need to cut the red tape if we want to keep building.
Okay, and the follow-up comment was that we, New York State Council of Churches, we do sell subscriptions for people to get 5% up to 20% depending on their area on their electric bill, and a financial incentive for the church through that.
That's wonderful. So you guys should come find them if you're looking for solar for your church.
Well, let me get in here. Noah has so much information that not only did we get him for this teach-in here for 30 minutes, but now he's going to have a seat, and he's going to join the solar panel.